So maybe you're an INFJ watching this video right now, and maybe you have some dating problems. You might even have seen my previous video where I talk about some common dating problems that INFJs have. And maybe you watched that video and you're like, man, I can relate to this. But Lindsay, you didn't really give us any solid advice. Well, this is what this video today is for. Welcome back to the Love Me Latte channel. If you haven't seen that first video that I talked about in my intro, I really recommend that you click on that first, as the points I'm going to be covering in today's video relate to the points I talked about in that video. And you can watch the video by clicking the little eye bubble up above here in the right hand corner. So the first point I want to bring up is that us INFJs need to learn to be more present, and we need to learn to live more in the real sensory world. So as INFJs, I think that we can get really carried away. I think that we can live inside of our minds and that we can start to get too much in our heads and start to think too much about our own thoughts, too much about our ideas and our insights. And the thing is, when you're not paying attention in the sensory world and you're more consumed with what's going on inside of your mind, you're going to miss out on some really good potential partners. So as INFJs, we do get a rep for being good listeners, and I do think that that is true a lot of the time. But I also think that there's times where, sure, we might be nodding along, like, oh yeah, I hear what you're saying, but we're really inside of our own minds. The gears start to turn and we start to think about stuff that's going to happen in the future, essentially. And it's really crucial for us as INFJs, in order for us to make deeper connections with people, we need to gather sensory information from other people. So we need to listen to what other people have to say. And I find that body language is also really important, especially if we're trying to find a potential partner. I know for myself, I try and find people who have more open body language and more friendly body language, because I find that these people are going to be a lot more easier for me to approach. If somebody's smiling a lot, if they make good eye contact, that's something that I think is really attractive, and so it might make it so that I will actually go and approach that person. Another thing too is to pay attention and maybe overhear some conversations. I know some people are like, oh, don't eavesdrop, but I think that it is a good thing to do, because I think it's a good way to gather information about somebody that you don't know. So let's say you're sitting in a bar or at a coffee shop or something and you see a cute guy or girl over there in the distance. Sometimes it's good to listen in on their conversation, because sometimes looks really aren't enough to attract us INFJs to go over and to talk to those other people, especially if you are a demisexual INFJ, which can be very common for INFJs. Not all of us are demisexual, but some of us definitely are. So, looks aren't enough for us. So if we're able to gather some information about people by just listening and paying attention to our surroundings, it might make it easier for us to go and approach somebody. So for the second point, I'm going to divide it up into two camps. And the thing with this one is that as an INFJ, you could fall honestly into both of the camps, even simultaneously. So the first camp of INFJs are going to be those types of people who have this vision in their mind of who their ideal partner is. And yet when they go out and they date in the real world, they find that nobody measures up to what these expectations are that we have. And the second camp of INFJs are the ones that have rose-colored glasses on, where we tend to only see what we want to see. We tend to only see the good in people, and we tend to neglect the negative in people and see the toxicity that this relationship could really have. So I think as INFJs in general, we have a really hard time finding this balance between having too high of standards and then also not having enough boundaries established. So I'm going to address both of those points. In regards to the first camp, I think that it's good. It's good to have some type of expectation of what you want in a partner. It's good to know some qualities that you do want in a partner, and also to be aware of some maybe potential red flags. The problem with this is that a lot of the time you don't really know what you want until you start the dating process. I know for myself, in the past, I've made a list of all these qualities that I wanted to find in a partner. And I actually found somebody who met a lot of these qualities and these expectations, but the relationship still didn't necessarily end well. I'm not with the person today, for example. I think it's really important for you as an INFJ to really critically evaluate your list that you have, whether it's a written list or it's just a list in your mind. Really think about what those crucial things are that you need in a partner. There's going to be some things such as having an honest partner, somebody that's loving and caring. That is perfectly okay. That's healthy. That's fine. But let's say, for example, you have something like, oh, I want somebody with a similar sense of humor to me. Well, I don't think that that's something that you need to have. Because sometimes you might meet somebody and they have a different sense of humor as you, for example. But then when you meet the person, you start dating them, you're like, oh, cool. Like, we don't have the same sense of humor, but I still appreciate your sense of humor and I still find it funny. I've also heard lots of stories of people meeting people in the real world, dating, who, they consider to be the one, who didn't even meet anything off of their checklists. They just kind of met the person and it was totally unexpected. They didn't meet their ideal perfect partner, because there's no such thing as a perfect partner. So as an INFJ, it's fine to have some standards, but you really need to critically evaluate your list and to really narrow it down to those just few crucial things that you need in a relationship. You need to be open when it comes to dating, because you just never know what qualities you're really going to like in somebody until you start that dating process. And I know for myself, like, after dating some people, there's some new qualities that I would put on my list, and there's also some red flags that I would put on my list just from dating people. And that's the thing, is you truly don't know. You might think that you know what you want in a partner, but you don't really truly know until you start dating them and putting the actions out into the real world. So on the other side of things, as INFJs, I find that we are really able to see multiple sides to a situation and to see our partner's point of view. So let's say, for example, our partner does something to really make us upset, but then our partner starts talking to us and they start explaining their side. Well, us as INFJs, with our extroverted feeling, a lot of the time we're open to that. We're like, oh yeah, I can see where you're coming from. We're open to other people's point of views. But this isn't always a good thing, because we can let a relationship get very toxic over time. And so for this one, I think it's really important to take a step back and to critically evaluate your relationship and how you truly feel in the relationship. I know that this can be hard for INFJs to do sometimes, because we're more in tune with other people's emotions a lot of the time and less in tune to our own emotions. But this is something that you got to get used to and you got to do. So just sit back and reflect. If you want to journal, or just if it's better for you to just think freely, you can do that. But just have check-ins with yourself to see, how is this relationship going? How do I feel in this relationship overall? Relationships aren't perfect, so there's going to be times where you're going to be upset in a relationship, but you need to see, is it worth it? How do I feel most of the time, the majority of the relationship? Does my partner make me feel good most of the time, or do they make me feel bad? Because if your partner keeps making you feel bad over and over again, I honestly think that it's time to end the relationship. Because when somebody truly loves and truly cares about you, they won't be putting you down. They won't be making you feel bad all the time. And you deserve the best. You deserve to have a loving and caring partner. So yeah, I think it's important for you as an INFJ to learn to establish boundaries and to know when to bring things up to your partner. Communication really is key. I think some things you might have to let go. I know for myself that I can be a nitpicker. I've had many people tell me that when I've been in relationships, that I can be a nitpicker and I pick on people. And that's something that I need to work on, because it's not fair to my partner if I'm picking them apart because they're not perfect in my mind, right? That's not cool. Nobody is perfect, and I shouldn't expect people to be. But you also need to learn to establish strong boundaries and to communicate when somebody is truly upsetting you. If somebody's just kind of mildly annoying you, maybe you don't necessarily need to bring that up. But if that mild annoyance starts to build over time and you start to get really irritated and really angry and upset, then it definitely is worth mentioning to your partner. Like I said before, you deserve the best, and as INFJs, we really do need to learn to establish more boundaries with people, and it's okay to establish boundaries. Don't feel like you're being a bad person for doing that. Everybody deserves to have some types of high standards for themselves. Remember, it's really based off of how you feel. If somebody is making you feel crappy, leave the person. It's not worth it, trust me. So the third point I want to bring up is that sometimes as INFJs, when we finally meet somebody who we really deeply connect with on an emotional level, sometimes we can dive in so quick and so deep. So I do find that a lot of INFJs are hopeless romantics. I think a lot of INFJs do believe in the one or believe in soulmates. So sometimes when you find somebody that you're really vibing with, that you're really connecting with, you sometimes start to think, ooh, can this person be the one? Is this the person I'm going to marry? Is this the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? And that's a no-no. No, you need to slow down. Dating is fun. The process of dating is fun. You gotta try and make it fun and not take it so seriously. I think some of my favorite parts about dating is just getting to really know people. I love learning different things about people, and I love to learn what people's passions are. I also love to try new things. I love trying new restaurants, coffee shops, exploring new places around me. It's a lot of fun. So really try not to take dating too seriously. You never know who's going to be your soulmate or who's going to be the one. Like I said before, it could really be somebody who's unexpected. But you can't just assume just because you have a close connection with somebody that that person's going to be the one. Because a lot of the time, I'm telling you, that's not going to be the case. I think one of the other big problems when it comes to diving in really deep into a relationship and really giving it your all is because you really idolize the relationship and you put the relationship on a pedestal. And the issue with this is that you're kind of making the relationship your number one priority. And relationships are super important, don't get me wrong, and they should be one of your top priorities. But I don't think that relationships should triumph everything else. So a lot of the time with the relationships, it's out of your control. You can't really control it. You can't control the other person. You can't control their emotions. So you might think the relationship is going well, but the other person might not think that, and they might break up with you. That's the thing. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen in a relationship. So I think it's really important that you as an INFJ to stop idolizing relationships. Again, relationships are important and you need to put in the effort for the person. Don't get me wrong, but you cannot make relationships your top priority over everything else. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to other people like your family and your friends. You matter. You're important. You need to love yourself. You need to take time for yourself. Make sure that you keep doing your hobbies. Make sure that you still spend time with your family and friends. This is vital. This is important to prevent codependency in relationships. Because I've had this issue before where I got so consumed with my relationships that I lost my self-identity. I lost who I was. I started becoming more like that person. I didn't hang out with my family and friends as much. I didn't make time for myself and make times for my hobbies. So really, please, INFJ, make sure that you still take the time for yourself. It's so important. The relationship with yourself really is number one. So don't forget about that. The number 4 kind of conflicts this one a little bit, but it's something that I know I personally relate to. And that is, as INFJs, sometimes we're the opposite, and we can actually be really skeptical when it comes to emotional relationships, and we might be closed off from our partners. So this can be for a number of different reasons. This can definitely be from some really bad and traumatic past dating experiences with people. And this can also just be something that you have dealt with maybe all of your life. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of why somebody might be skeptical into getting into relationships. And I don't think that this is just an INFJ thing. I think that there are a lot of people who are skeptical of getting emotionally close with somebody else. I do, however, feel like INFJs, we can tend to be skeptical of people in general. We're not always going to be super trusting of other people. And the thing is, you can't let this hold you back. And I know for myself, I do have problems with expressing myself. I think that other INFJs can have problems with expressing their feelings as well. And I feel like as INFJs, a lot of the time we feel like we're also misunderstood, and that makes it so that we don't want to open up to other people. So I think as a society as a whole, I think we view vulnerability and being open with people as being a weak trait. And I think the reason that we think that is because of rejection. And the thing is, everybody gets rejected in life. It doesn't matter how good your personality it is. It doesn't matter how good looking you are. You will be rejected. This is life, unless you want to avoid it, right? Which is what a lot of people do. But it's okay to get rejected. Everybody gets rejected. And honestly, if I get rejected, that's great because I know that that person wasn't meant for me. And that I will be that much closer to actually meeting the person that is right for me. So don't fear rejection. Because the other thing is too, I'm sure that at least once in your life, you have rejected somebody yourself. It's just a way of life. And again, when you reject people or you get rejected, it does get you closer to meeting your ideal person. So don't be afraid of being open and vulnerable with people. This is actually a strength because much of our society isn't able to do this. It's really the only way too to get really close to somebody. When I think about my closest relationships with people, it was always built off of trust, openness, and vulnerability. So don't be afraid to do this. And if somebody doesn't like it or rejects you, that's okay, like I mentioned before, because you will find somebody that will really appreciate your openness and vulnerability. Don't let society scare you off with this. Be true to yourself, be your authentic self. The last point I want to make kind of relates back to point number one, which is that you as an INFJ, you gotta put yourself out there. This is the one that I struggle with the most. And the reason for that is because not only am I a shy, introverted INFJ, but I also have social anxiety. So it's really hard for me to put myself out there. But the reason I say it relates to point one is because I do find that a really good thing to do is to pay attention to your surroundings. Because when you pay attention to your surroundings, you start to gather information. The information goes into your mind, you filter it, and then you can be like, oh, what this person said, I also agree with what this person says. Oh, I feel the exact same way, and I don't know many people that feel this way. This person seems interesting. I feel like I'm more comfortable now with approaching them or talking to them further. And also the same thing with the body language. When somebody has open body language, when they look like a friendly person, it does really help me to go up to that person and to start talking to them. So pay attention to that sensory stuff. And you just got to put yourself out there. It's really hard to do, and the best way to do it is to take really small steps. So there was a point in time where I wouldn't even leave the house alone. I was too afraid to do that, and I was too afraid to talk to people by myself. But over time, I started to do some small steps. I started to go for walks in my local park. I started to sit by myself and just do some work at a local coffee shop. And over time, I've started to get more comfortable with this process. And I started to talk more with people. So people at work, for example, that can be a really great way to start. It's just to start saying hi to people. Say, hey, how are you doing today? And you generally take an interest in what they have to say. And share yourself, especially if, like I said before, if somebody shares something about themselves that you really relate to, don't be afraid to open up and to continue the conversation. I really do think that those people would appreciate it. And that's the thing with dating is like you don't have a choice. You kind of have to put yourself out there. I do know that for introverts, a lot of the time, it can be easier to date online. Dating apps are great because you get to gather some information about the person over text. So if you're like me and you're more shy or maybe you live with social anxiety, it can be really scary to go up to a person. But then when you have some information about what the person likes, what they dislike, it's a lot easier to have a conversation in person because you have something to work with. It's going to make you a lot more comfortable and therefore make you less anxious. Anyways, that's it for today's video. If you got something out of it, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. It really would make my day if you would all do that. Anyways, I hope you have a great rest of your day and be sure to love yourself a latte.